Hi everyone, it's Kate Kalthoff and welcome to a Stamping to Share video. Today we're going to make a card with Mediterranean moments and then we're going to use a sentiment from Teeny Tiny Wishes. And so let me show you the card we're going to create. I love collecting stamp sets from Stampin Up that are reminiscent of some of the places that I've visited over the years. And by being a part of Stampin Up, I've had the privilege of going on a Mediterranean cruise. Now, of course, we earn these incentive trips, and so I worked really hard because my husband and I really enjoyed this, and it was something we kind of had on our bucket list, and what better way than to go as a guest of Stampin' Up. So this is the stamp set. It's the Mediterranean Moments stamp set. You'll find it in the 2017-18 Stampin' Up annual catalog. And then we're going to be using watercolor pencils, and then, as I mentioned before, the Teeny Tiny Wishes for the word that says friend to friend. So let me get these out of the way and we'll get started recreating this card. The first thing that we're going to need is some soft suede cardstock. This is 5.5 by 8.5, and then I've scored it at 4 1/4. And so let me just remove this little piece here, and then we're going to fold this in half, and let me use my bone folder, give that a good press so it lies flat for us. And then the first thing that we're going to do is take a piece of Emerald Envy cardstock. It looks like this. It's 3 3/4 by 5 1/8. I wanted kind of a long piece of cardstock here that would be narrower and not exactly even on both sides, because we have a card that is picturing an alleyway, and so I wanted to give that kind of narrow look on the front of the card. So again, this is a little bit narrower than what I would normally use, and we're just going to take this and put it down with some multi-purpose liquid glue, and we'll just run a little bit, and we're going to put it on a little bit tilted so that you can see some of the brownness on both of the sides, but it will be at an angle. So let me bring this up to the camera so you can see how I angled that. The next thing we have is a piece of pool party paper. This is 3 1/4 by 4 5/8. This is what we'll be doing our stamping on and all of our coloring. So I have the Mediterranean Moments alleyway here, and I am going to take some chocolate chip ink from Stampin' Up, and we'll just ink up this stamp with chocolate chip, and then I'm going to stamp that right in the center of this pool party paper. Give that a nice press, and we'll lift it away, and then you can see that it is transferred onto this pool party paper, and then what we get to do is do a little coloring. So I want this to dry, so I did stamp one in advance, and I was going to show you the watercolors that I will use. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that I am using, and this particular one here is basic gray. I'm only using that on the inside of the card, so the outside of the card we're using these 4. So we've got Daffodil Delight, and we have Bermuda Bay, and Old Olive, and Early Espresso. Now most of this will be colored with Early Espresso, and the way that I do it is I just find these little lines, and all I'm doing is putting a little bit of the watercolor pencil on those lines, just drawing those lines in. And then you can see where we have some bigger areas, like this little archway here in the background. I just put a little bit in that area too, and I either draw it in like this or do little swirls, so you can see how that looks, just like this. And then when I get to an area that has a little bit of a light that I want highlighted, I'll take the yellow and I'll just color in where I want the light with yellow. And then there's another one over here in the background. And then of course I want to do the foliage. So I'll be using 2 colors for the foliage, Old Olive and Bermuda Bay. And all I do is wherever I think there's some foliage, I just color in. And again, I'm doing this very lightly. In fact, I'll hold it up to the camera here in a second so you can see just how scribbly this is. So I want to make some different colors in the foliage, so I add in a little Bermuda Bay. So let me show you what this looks like up close. Pretty scribbly, and you can see some of my lines here. But when you're using watercolor pencils, the magic actually happens when you bring a blender pen into the picture. And here's a little piece of scrap so we can clean off our blender pen. So what I do is I just take my blender pen and I color in where I've done a little bit of that scribbling, so you can see how cool this looks. So I had worked ahead and did a little bit on the bench, and then some of these little bricks or tiles down here. And then of course our archway, you can just take the blender pen and just color that in, and it makes it all look really beautiful and blended, just like a blender pen should. All right, now I'll change colors here, so I'm going to just take a piece of scrap and make sure that I have all of the brown off of my blender pen before I go in and I do this foliage. So let me remind you what that looks like up close. It's just a little scribbly marks, and then when you take the blender pen to it, you just kind of smooth it all out and blend those colors a little bit, and it just looks awesome. And now we have a floral piece up here. So it's really, really cool. And then of course I would clean my blender pen and go in and do the yellow. So every time you change colors, you want to blend that excess color out before starting a new color. So that gives you an idea of how to use the watercolor pencils. And again, for this particular card on the front, I just used 4. Now on the inside panel, and let me show you that, I am using Very Vanilla, and it's a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece. And then I stamped the little kitty sitting in a chair. And again, I'll just show you real quick. All I've done at this point is just kind of traced in the colors that I wanted to use. On the kitty, I used Early Espresso and the Basic Gray. And then on the tiles down here, I used Basic Gray and a little bit of Early Espresso. So let's go ahead and do the foliage here. So again, I'm going to use the Old Olive, and I'm just scribbling in a little bit, and then I take the Bermuda Bay, just add a little bit more of this green in here, a little bit more of a blue green to give that some variation. And so now this is ready for the blender pen. And just looking at it, it doesn't look that impressive, but like I said, the magic always happens when you bring the blender pen in. So the first thing I'm going to do is the kitty. So let me make sure I don't have any yellow in here. And I'm just going to go over the top. And just as an FYI, I stamped this also with chocolate chip. So I'm doing the kitty first, and I'm just adding a little bit of color here. It's a little bit over here. And then the chair I colored with Basic Gray, just the top of the chair. So I can go ahead and color that in. And then for the rest of the chair, I'll just follow down these little streaks of color that I had put on previously. And it's just magic. It's just so addicting and so relaxing to use these watercolor pencils. It can look so professional, and yet when you're doing it, it looks kind of scribbly and streaky, but once you have it done, it's just gorgeous. So again, here's the base. Just gonna color in a little bit there. And now let's go ahead and do our foliage. So again, we're just adding the blender pen to the foliage that we had just lightly scribbled in. And you can just see how awesome this looks. So let me hold it up. Isn't that sweet? Now we're gonna add a little bit of yellow to this jar down here, or to the flower pot, just where these little streaks are. And again, blend it all in with the blender pen. And that adds just a little bit of color. Okay, so we have the inside panel complete. Looks just like this. And then we want to add we want to take some soft suede, which I have right here, and a Stampin' sponge, and we are going to edge this all the way around. And we want some pretty big edges. So you can see that I am going pretty far into the paper. I want a real rustic, vintagey look. And if you do it like that, you will get this nice edging that looks like this. And I am going to show you what I did on the one that I had done in advance, because I knew you didn't want to watch me color this entire thing. So I did the exact same thing. I used soft suede, and I just did these big streaks on my edges. So it kind of colors in this whole photo of this alleyway, or this whole stamped image of the alleyway. And it looks so gorgeous. And I'll just bring it up close so you can see how nice all of this foliage looks in here, and how these little yellow light lamps just brighten up that alleyway. It's just so pretty. All right, so let's go ahead and finish putting the card together. We are going to layer our stamped image onto a piece of Marina Mist. This is 3.5 by 4 7/8. And we're going to do that with a little multi-purpose liquid glue. And we're just going to set this in straight on so that the border is even all the way around. And then to give this somewhat of a, I don't know, European look, I always feel like they do a lot of lace curtains. We are going to do that with a little bit of our lace. And this is from Stampin' Up, and it's called our lace trim. It's kind of a vanilla color. And you want this to be just a little bit bigger than your panel, because you're going to just tape it around on the back side, which is what I'm going to do. So let me go ahead and do that. So we're going to bring it right up to the top so you can't even really see the blue up there. We're going to tape that in, and we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side as well as on the bottom. All right, we have our panel all decorated up with that lace trim, and now it's time to just put it onto our card. So we're going to do that with some dimensionals. As you can see, I've used 5 dimensionals, and we're just going to flip this over, and we are going to line this up so it is smack dab in the center of our card. And we actually do want to center this in. So we have a little bit of the emerald green peeking out as on angles at both sides, and a little bit up here and a little bit down there. It's a little bit kilter, but that's okay. It makes it look kind of more old world and vintage like. And now for the inside panel, we're just going to adhere that with a little bit of snail right at the top. And then we can put this on the inside panel of our card. Doesn't that look really nice? Oh, I would just love to get a card like this in the mail. And then I went ahead and did this in advance, but I just took a little scrap of Very Vanilla. I stamped friend to friend with chocolate chip, and then I edged it with the sponge with some soft suede. And so now I'm going to take some mini dimensionals, and we'll just put about 3 of these on the back. The mini dimensionals are super handy for layering this little punch out, which, by the way, was punched out with the classic label punch. It looks like this from Stampin' Up. So then we can just take these little peelings off the back. Oops. Let me grab that again. One more here. And then we'll turn around and we'll set this onto the front of our card. So it looks just like this. And there it is. Our card is complete. Here's the front, and here is the inside. All done with our watercolor pencils, which look like this. And here we go with the one that I had done in advance. So thank you so much for being a part of my community. I truly appreciate you. If you'd like more ideas or would like to place an order, be sure to visit my blog at www.stampingtoshare.com. And have a great day. Bye-bye.